So it's been a hot minute since I've done a tier list, and I actually really enjoy making these tier lists. So today I'm going to be doing the entire all 10 DCEU films tier list, including Zack Snyder's Justice League. That came out fairly recently. It's not super recently, but whatever. Before I give you guys my tier list, I'll leave a link down in the description box below for the tier list I used for this video. So let me know your guys' tier list down in the comment section below, and ranking. What do you think of these films? What are your thoughts? So the basic categories is pretty simple this time. We have S tier, which is just the best of the best. A tier, which is pretty great but not quite S tier. B tier, which is pretty good. C tier, which is pretty basic. And D tier, which is just downright bad. And these films can vary in quality in terms of how you're gonna look at them. So first up, we have Man of Steel, and to be honest, I don't hate this film, but it's gonna go into C tier. C tier is it's a middle line between B tier and a middle line between D tier. I don't think it's pretty good. I don't think it's bad either, and I think that's why C tier is a good placement for Man of Steel. I just never really cared for this film. It's a bit too long. The action sequences go on for a bit too long. The story, plot lines don't really mesh as well as I want. And to be honest, it's kind of boring at a lot of points. The film's not really that interesting. And I do like the concept of like a more ground-to-earth, realistic take on Superman. I like that. But I just didn't really find the execution to be all that engaging and all that really that good. I don't hate this film by any means, but I don't really love it. Next up, we have Batman v Superman, The Ultimate Cut, going into B tier. Now, listen, if this was the theatrical cut, this would go straight into C tier. But since it is the Ultimate Edition, it's going to go into B tier. The Ultimate Edition really does fix not every problem that I had with this film, but quite a bit of the problems I and a lot of people had with Batman v Superman. This film fixes. I think the action sequences are pretty fun and exciting, especially the warehouse fight scene. I think Ben Affleck is great as Batman, and even though I feel like this film's finale just is dragged on and on and on, and just goes on for far too long, and I feel like the film is a bit too long. Some elements could have been trimmed out, some moments could have been completely cut out. But I actually have a lot of fun with this film. And there's a lot of flaws with the film. There's a lot of moments that don't really work. Doomsday, Superman's death, all that stuff does not really need to be in here. This could easily have just been a Batman v Superman situation. But hey, I don't hate this film, and I don't love it either. I think it's a pretty good movie. Next up, we have Shazam. Now, Shazam is going straight into B tier. Now, originally, this would have been straight A tier. I loved this film when I first came out. If you guys saw a video I made a many months back titled The Revisited, I recently just revisited this film a while ago, and it's not that great on rewatches. Now, it's still fun, quirky, charming. Zachary Levi is great. Jack Dylan Grazer is great. I really like Mark Strong as Dr. Savannah. The action sequences are pretty fun. The comedy's pretty fun. The Foster stuff is pretty fun. But I just don't really find Ash Ranger that good as an actor, and I found his plot line of him trying to find his mom to be really not that compelling. And the scene between him and his mom I found to be actually quite bad. The dialogue, the performances, the way it's edited, it just feels really awkward and strange. And some of the visual effects are pretty great, and some of the visual effects really aren't great. Don't hate this film by any means, but there's a lot of tonal inconsistencies. Like, you have a really fun upbeat beat moment, and then a monster will bite a guy's head off. So the tonal inconsistencies of this film is not really the clearest. Now, again, I think this is a fun, charming, quirky film that I can easily put on and enjoy. I just don't think it's as good on rewatches. Next up, we have Zack Snyder's Justice League. Easy S tier. I adore this film, which, again, it so surprises me how much I adore Zack Snyder's Justice League. It really does surprise me, because as you can see, I don't hate his other two DC films, but I don't really love him. This film did everything right. The action sequences were great and exciting. Steppenwolf, why not still a perfect villain, was more fleshed out. The design was better. The hero team-up moments were great. The film's epicness is really fleshed out, and Cyborg is a much more better, compelling, and interesting character than he was in that theatrical cut, but you can't even really call it the theatrical cut. You can just call it the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League. This film is great, it's exciting. It's not a flawless, perfect film. S tier does not mean this is the best film ever made. In terms of DCEU films, though, it's definitely the best. Now we can get to Joss Whedon's Justice League, which is it's easy D tier. This film is terrible. This film is awful. I hate this film with a fiery passion. I didn't like this film to begin with, but now after watching what the film could have been and should have been, I hate this film even more. The direction is bad. The performances are really weird and awkward. Cutting 2 hours of this film is just makes this film feel weird, wonky. This film is just terrible, and I'm done talking about it. It's just a bad movie. Next up is Wonder Woman 1884. It's also going to go in D tier. Now, after my initial first viewing of this film, I've thought about it some more. The film's quite bad. Which is a shame because Patty Jenkins is a very talented and good director, as she's shown with other films, TV shows, and even with the first Wonder Woman. And I think the performances are quite good. I like the 80s style, but this film's tonal inconsistencies, the plot lines, the story, the editing, the final fight I find to be atrocious. I find this film to be truly atrocious. It's not Joss Whedon's Justice League level, but there's a lot of moments in this film where I just kind of sit back and be like, what were they thinking? There is some fun moments, there's some exciting moments, but overall this film is just not a good film. Next up, we have the first Wonder Woman, which I'm going to put in A tier. It's not a perfect film. This is not a flawless masterpiece, but I would say it's pretty fun and interesting. I think the action sequences, for the most part, are fun and exciting. The pacing is really well done. The performances, the relationship between Diana and Steve Trevor, I think, is really fun, and those actors have great chemistry. I think the direction is a lot of fun. What really falls back is the villain and the third act. The villains in these films are just really bad villains, but especially in the two Wonder Woman films, they have one of the most weakest villains in the entire DCEU. They're not quote-unquote boring, but they are kind of boring. They're just kind of bland and not interesting, and the final battle action sequence just kind of turns into a crazy light show where the bad guy just kind of spews really bad exposition. This isn't really that engaging of a third act, which is the same. If the third act would have landed, this film would have easily been in S tier, but sadly the third act kind of weighs it down. Next up, we have James Wan's Water Adventure Aquaman. It's going into A tier. I'm sorry, I think this is an extremely fun film. I think the action sequences is probably the best action in the entire DCU. It's well shot, it's well edited. The visual effects, for the most part, are spot on. I love the look of Atlantis. The performances are fun, over the top. This film does not take itself seriously one bit. This film is quirky, it's fun, it's exciting. Some of the green screen's not that good, and the finale, why not bad? It's not as good as the other two acts, and I think the humor is awful. I don't think there's one single joke that lands, but there's some absolutely stellar moments in Aquaman. Next up, we have David Ayer's Suicide Squad. This film is a mess, and it's going into C tier. This film isn't a bad film, and the reason why it's not going into D tier is because there's some pretty great performances in this film, some fun action sequences, and I can sit down and watch this film and not be totally bored out of my mind. This film is not boring. This film has a lot of problems, mostly Jared Leto's performance as the Joker, but I can't really say he's bad in it, mostly because the material they gave him was bad and the way they edited his sequences was bad. But even in Zack Snyder's Justice League, I didn't really care for him that much. There is a lot of good in this film, but there's just so much not so good in this film that truly lacks it down. Enchantress is such a poor villain. The action sequences, while fun, are pretty generic. The film story, pretty generic. And I don't really care for it that much. And finally, we have Birds of Prey. It's going into A tier. I know not a lot of people like this film, but I think this is a much better version of what Suicide Squad could have been. The action sequences are great. The villain is really fun and exciting. The performances are really good. I don't think this film needed to be R-rated, and some of the jokes don't land, and some of the team-up moments, they don't feel really that earned. But overall, this is just such a fun, fast-paced, really brisk film that I thoroughly enjoyed. So there you guys have it. That was my tier list ranking of the DC Extended Universe films. What do you think of to know all your thoughts down in the comments below? Again, I'll leave a link down in the description box below for you guys to see this tier list. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. General out.